Yeah.
Usually
they can
just
take
signed
some
them.
time.
Yep.
Call the meeting to order for the Economic Development Authority for Tuesday, July 12th, 2022. We'll waive the roll call. We have a quorum present. Our first item is 2.1, just a public notice to conduct a meeting by interactive technology.
I think we need to do the roll call because Les is remote.
Okay. We just have to take a roll call. We haven't done that in the past.
We will need to do roll call on every item.
Right, like we would do for anything that needs action and approval.
Including the first one, to have it received and filed.
Okay, because it doesn't say that we needed to do that on this notice. Okay, so we want to call, does this have to be offered as a motion and seconded and such?
yes.
Okay, so then I'll entertain a motion at this point.
I'll offer the motion to receive the and order filed, the public notice notifying that Les will be joining remotely. Or do you want me to read all of that?
That's fine.
I think the abbreviated version is sufficient.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
We have a first, and thank you for the second, Les, by the way. Good morning. Any other discussion on the matter? Hearing none, then we'll call for the roll call vote on this item.
Commissioner Berg?
Yes.
Commissioner Betker?
Yes.
Commissioner Yanni?
Yes.
Commissioner Schultz?
Yes.
President Brum?
Yes. It's carried. Item 3.1, approval of the June 14th, 2022 minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
First and second, is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, once again, call for the roll call vote.
Commissioner Berg?
Yes.
Commissioner Betker?
Yes.
Commissioner Yanni?
Yes.
Commissioner Schultz? Commissioner Schultz?
Yes.
President Brum?
Yes, that motion is carried. Item 4.1, administrative activities reports for May 2022.
All right, good morning, President Brum and Commissioners. You have the report in your packet. I will just highlight a few items for you. Under the Homebuyer Assistance Loan Program, note that 3 applications were received and approved during the month of June. I did get another application this month for the remaining $635, so those funds are all spoken for the year. Note under the Get It Ready loan program, 1 loan closed during the month of June in the amount of $9,000. Under the multifamily rental rehab loan program, I had 2 inquiries for that program, but no applications were received. I think that's all I wanted to highlight, so unless there's any questions.
I'll make a motion to accept the EDA Director's administrative report for May.
I'll second.
First and second, is there any additional discussion on this item? Hearing none, we'll call again for the roll call vote.
Commissioner Berg?
Yes.
Commissioner Betker?
Yes.
Commissioner Yanni?
Yes.
Commissioner Schultz?
Yes.
President Brum?
Yes, motion is carried. Item 5.1, approve EDA July 12th claims.
Anything out of the ordinary this month?
No, I don't believe so.
Then I'll offer a motion to approve the EDA July 12, 2022 claims list.
Second.
First and second, any additional discussion on this matter? Hearing none, we'll call again for the roll call vote.
Commissioner Berg?
Yes.
Commissioner Betker?
Yes.
Commissioner Yanni?
Yes.
Commissioner Schultz?
I think that was a yes.
President Brum?
Yes. Motion is carried. Item 6.1, Small Business Incentive Grant Program. To allocate additional funds in the amount of $40,000 for the small business incentive grants.
So we talked about this program last month, and we were directed to take a look at it and come back to the commission with a recommendation. So you can see the history of the program there. Earlier this year, the EDA granted enough money to fund 6 grants this year because we already had a waiting list started at that time. I received 6 applications by the end of January, and I will be paying out the final grant, I believe, in August. And so we have a waiting list started. There are currently 8 businesses on the waiting list. I took a look at the businesses on the waiting list, and only 4 businesses have actually opened at this time. The other 4 are still planning to open later this year. So based on that, I'm recommending another $40,000 to fund the 4 businesses that are actually open this year. But that is completely up to you. If you do not want to fund, another 4, if you only want to do 2 or 3, I'm just going based on the businesses that actually would be eligible to be paid out in 2022.
A recap of the types of businesses that have received the funds this year, and then the 4 that are open right now and
my gosh.
pending. Just like what types of businesses are they? Are they larger business? Are they independents?
Well, they're all small businesses. They wouldn't be eligible if they were a large business. I know there's been a few salons this year. The one that will be paid out in August is a dog boarding business.
I'd say mostly retail. I know.
Inspire Event Center downtown got a grant this year.
Yeah.
It's a variety. I can't say there's any trend. I mean, it's been.
Yeah. Pretty much any 10 employees or less eligible to apply, and I would say most, if not all of them, do.
I know that one on the waiting list just opened, Mystic Dreams downtown. One is a skincare business.
And then the
Can't remember off the top of
restaurant
my
will be on
head.
the waiting list.
Yeah, but that's one of the ones that isn't open yet. So that's not one of the 4 that I'm
So
proposing.
Heather, would you anticipate the possibility of coming back again yet this year if some of these other additional businesses are ready to open or have opened?
I don't think so. I think because they'd be opening later in the year and they have to be open 3 months before they can be paid out, at that point, they could just wait for January.
Okay, so we may start the year off in 2023 then with, kind of like we did this year. We kind of all the money we allocated, we used quite early in the year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty
Okay.
much spoken for within that first month. And then they got paid out through the year based on the date the business opened. One of the businesses that would be funded if we do another 4 grants is an in-home daycare
Okay,
that started up.
and that was one of the exceptions for the only in-home business. I think we've spoken about that before. Is this our 3rd year in this program?
It started in 2019, so 19, 20, 21, it's our 4th year.
4th year already, okay. Do you know, I don't mean to put you on the spot, how many of these we've given out totally?
8, 13, and then 6 this year, 19.
Okay,
And every business is still open.
It is,
That
okay.
has received a grant.
okay. You knew what my next question was going to be. That's kind of scary. No, that's great. It's so.
Yeah, so far we have a
It's been
100%
effective in
success
terms
rate.
of sustainability as far as our
So far.
involvement. Okay.
Well, I'm in support of funding additional ones, so I'll offer a motion to allocate additional funds in the amount of $40,000 for the Small Business Incentive Grant Program.
Second.
We have a first and second. Is there any additional discussion on this matter?
I would only say if it continues to increase in popularity, and do you think funding for the 10,000 would be an issue? Could you potentially look at maybe, 7,500, so it just stretches those out a little further? But the 10,000, I think, is fine. It's a nice, round, very attractive number to an entrepreneur, so.
Right, and
2022 has just been unusually busy with entrepreneurs starting up businesses.
Well, and that was my only other thought too, is as we go into next year, do we look at upping it? Or do we also make it a needs-based? You know, they come in and apply up to $10,000 based on some prescribed needs that a formulation is, and I don't know what that would be yet. We'd have to develop that between now and then, but I don't know if that's a prudent measure. I agree with Andrea in terms of if we can leverage the money out or make it stretch a little better, that would be a good thing. But then it would maybe be based on some sort of prescribed needs that we could establish based on a per grant basis or whatever. But I have a sneaking suspicion that if we cap it at 10, most of them are going to come in and ask for the 10, and they're going to find a way to justify the 10, but,
I
you know.
can't imagine any new business that could start up and not have $10,000 in expenses in their
Yeah.
first year.
Well, and I don't know if we match dollar for dollar or dollar, $2 or something, any amount they put in, we double or something. I don't know. There's different ways we could approach it, but I just didn't know if that's the direction we want to take this. It seems to be catching on in popularity, which I think is a good thing. I think we want to try to encourage small businesses because, well, and I'm encouraged to hear that all the money we put out since 2019 is those businesses are still around because that doesn't always seem to be the case, especially in the current economic climate. So,
And the way this grant program works is they do have to turn in invoices for the amount that they're being, that they're receiving and proof that those invoices have been paid. So it's a reimbursement for
Okay.
expenses that they have incurred.
that's right. Now that you say that, I recall that. That's how we set that up. Okay. Any other discussion?
Popularity of this be attributed to the new mayor and council president?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure of it.
Listeners, I'm just teasing.
You are our chief
A lot of
cheerleader, so
people-
you're out there selling.
I just think a lot of people had a lot of time to think during COVID and reevaluate what they wanted to
I
be
think,
doing. So.
you know, and this is more than one case that I've heard, a story I've heard, people during the shutdown, you know, either they had to not work or they were working from home and they found some additional time. And a lot of folks found, well, I'm going to pursue this or pursue that. And it's turned into a business opportunity for them. And I've heard more than one case. And I'm not certain if some of these people now moving to the next level with, establishing a small business, it may not have started in that environment. So,
Yeah, so I'm not anticipating every year to be as busy as this year. I think this is an anomaly.
and I like our approach. We'll just kind of play it by ear. So I guess, come around in January, we'll set the limits and we'll see how many might be on the waiting list at that point and then make a determination.
Yep.
And then it can't be attributed to the EDA president because I won't be on anymore at that point. So it'll be my successor that'll have to wrestle with that issue.
And I would just throw out food for thought. So this year, if you approve this, you've effectively funded 10, which would be $100,000, which does eat into what we get from our revenue from Garden Terrace. So when we look at funding other stuff, you have to really take that into
I think
account.
we're kind of reaching that point of critical mass with some of the other commitments we're talking about too, and you're absolutely right. So we have to begin to look at our resources. They're becoming more scarce, so we have to kind of look at everything that we want to choose to go forward with a little more cautious eye.
Right, and last month we did receive $53,000 in damages from a lawsuit, so that is in a
Oh,
sense.
that's true.
So this is could be coming out of that.
Well, we allocated some of that money for computer technology, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I got the quote, and I'll be bringing that next month.
Okay, so we've already spent some of that money is what I'm saying.
But yeah, with the damages coming in, it does help offset some of this. So
Sure. Okay. All right. Great discussion. Is there any more? If not, then I will call for a roll call vote on this matter.
Commissioner Berg?
Yes.
Commissioner Becker?
Yes.
Commissioner Yanni?
Yes.
Commissioner Schultz?
Yes.
President Brom?
Yes, that motion is carried. We're on to item 6.2, J.R. Shugel Infrastructure. Discuss potentially funding an infrastructure project for J.R. Shugel in the amount of $15,000.
Mr. President, Commissioners, before you, you have a request from J.R. Schugel looking to extend their water and sewer down to a lot. If you look at the map, it's coming down 20th, just past the substation and the dog kennel across the street from the bowling alley. The issue that they have is that the water and sewer cuts off right on Minnesota Street. That's where it stops, and they would need to extend down 20th to get to their lot. The whole cost would be about $30,000. They are asking for half of the funding to get it there. My thoughts would be to do this as a forgivable loan, where if they start construction within 2 years, then that loan will start being forgiven and fully forgiven once they finish the project. And if they don't start within 2 years, they start making payments, and then once they start construction, those payments would stop until they finish, and that amount would be forgiven. Right now, this is just for discussion purposes to see if it's something you as the EDA would like to do. I would come back at the next meeting with, if you want to move forward with the loan, forgivable loan documents drafted by the city attorney to approve it. But kind of want to give J.R. Schugel some, assurance that yes, the EDA would be on board with this, or no, and then they'll have to figure something else out.
Are they intending on building a structure on that site?
Yes, expanding
Some
their
of the-
current operations, yeah.
Okay.
The $30,000, who's doing that work?
So they would hire that out. I'm assuming it'd be MR Paving because they're currently out there right now doing Broadway. So they would be able to mobilize.
So the city doesn't do that work?
No, we would not be doing that work.
And this then, since they're doing it themselves, this is not going to be a bonded project through the city?
No.
Okay. And this would be, they're taking it on because the timing of it then would be such.
Yeah, so
that they could
because
get it done more quickly?
because
Okay.
M&R is already out there, they can look at getting it done so they don't have to pay the mobilization costs. The engineer did look into seeing if we can do a change order, but the project was so far along, the Broadway project, that they couldn't add it.
Do you happen to know, with this expansion, are they bringing in more employees? Would they potentially?
We would have to, I'd iron out those details with them, but it sounded like they'd be adding some more employees, expanding their facility and warehouse.
Sure, okay.
What can of worms can this open for other businesses that want to expand?
None really, because this is what we would typically do anyway. It's ours, kind of the city's responsibility to get infrastructure to them, but since they're the only business that would be getting it, that's why they're coming to the table for half of that infrastructure. Some other businesses would look at, they've come to us, well, I need to get water and sewer to my building. Well, that's technically the responsibility of the business.
Well, and I'm assuming then all those other buildings in the area already have water and sewer services.
Yeah.
This is kind of an outlier.
Yeah.
So they're really stuck in a kind of a unique set of circumstances. So I think we could establish that in this particular instance, there is sort of a precedence. Instead, it's an individual lot that's an outlier that doesn't have services to it, and they could petition the city, but then it would be on the city's timetable with
Yeah.
getting it bonded, and this just allows them to meet, I imagine, a construction timeline that's going to be suitable for them to get the whole project completed.
Yeah, because technically their only other option would be just to take it from Broadway, going all the way down to that back of their property, and it's probably more expensive to do it
Sure,
that way.
this
than-
is more cost effective.
Yeah.
I'm just going to make a note. So I do have a conflict of interest with this because my husband works for J&R Schugel and it is employee owned. So I will be abstaining from further discussion in any vote.
Chairman Brown,
Yes, sir.
just thinking about this, could we share this cost with, I forgot the new name of the New Ulm Economic Development Corporation. Would they have any interest in helping with this?
I guess that,
Question to Paul.
well, to me, that's another matter that J.R. Strugel's come to us. They haven't come to Newbrick. And J.R. Shugel's already putting up 50% of the cost.
Right.
You don't see that as viable then?
I
I'm just thought came up.
Yeah, I would say for timing's sake, probably not. We do have, this is kind of more the discussion to say yes, so they can order it in, get everything underway, and then next month approve it so it goes through. So they can kind of get it in as the work is going on down there. But I mean, I think they'll probably look at other avenues to fund their half, and we can mention they can talk to
that's
Newbert
up
for
to-
it.
Yeah, this is just for the half of it.
Yeah.
And to me, I think it really, given the set of circumstances, would be an issue that I think very comfortable with us supporting. I think it's an expansion of a long-term business in New Ulm, an employer in New Ulm, in that, given the set of circumstances we find ourselves in, if they want to move forward with it, this seems to be the most feasible way to approach it.
Does our attorney have any concerns on this topic?
Good morning. I'm Robert Scott, for those who haven't met me. I'm listening to the discussion on this matter. It sounds like the proposal is something within the EDA's authority to do, and the proposal to structure it as a forgivable loan to me makes sense. So no, I don't have any major concerns at this point.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I guess I like the proposal as far as the forgivable loan piece of it. I mean, it's worded in here as a potential expansion. I'm not sure how concrete those plans are. So knowing that, if we structure it to only really be forgiven if they move forward with that, makes sense to me.
Well, and there's incentive built in with the forgivable loan for them to act sooner rather than later as well, so.
So, kind of my question would be to the group, what would be that time limit? Year and a half, 2 years? I was thinking leaning on the 2-year mark just with how stuff is going right now with construction and
Yeah,
everything.
I would
but
think that would be reasonable.
So if you're looking for feedback, I guess a 2-year forgivable loan for that amount, I'd
Okay.
be looking forward to seeing that again on the agenda.
Okay.
I'd support that as well.
Perfect. All right. So then I'll work with the city attorney and let J.R. Schugel know to make sure that they're still on board with that. And then if they are, then I'll bring it back at the next meeting.
Okay. So there's no further action needed at this time, which brings us then to item 7.1, Garden Terrace appraisal. We will receive and order file for the Garden Terrace appraisal report.
So this was something that you had approved back on May 10th. The appraisal was completed on June 17th, right after our June meeting, and it came back kind of where I thought it would come back at about 7.47 million. So this is just kind of food for thought for the EDA looking at it. If you potentially want to sell at some point, with 7.4 million, if we can sell it and get that, set that money aside with the interest that we potentially would earn, we'd be getting about the same revenue, and we would have less operating expense. It would purely just be income, and on the city side of things, it would actually go into the tax rolls at that point, generating more taxable property, and then potentially we'd look at either throwing in or a very nominal fee that land right in front as part of the deal, and give it, hey, within a year or two you have to start construction, submit plans or doing something, or then it reverts back to the city for construction of some type of Garden Terrace 3. So kind of just food for thought at this point for you to take a look at and kind of mull this over, and then we can bring it back at August or September and actually have a discussion on it. I know the report was fairly long.
No, we pay funds to the county in lieu of taxes on that too, that we would take into consideration. You don't happen to know what that is offhand?
Pay
or-
to the city, I think it's about like 25,000 a year.
Okay,
Sounds
which would be considerably more on the tax rolls.
Yeah.
at this. Nicole, if we take this in, do we allocate that on our balance sheet as the asset based on the current appraised value then? Or do we use an historic value as we look at our assets?
Just the historic value is what we have in there that we
Okay,
appreciate or depreciate every year.
okay. And I don't know.
Chairman
what the-
Braun,
Yes, sir.
question for Nicole or Chris. Have we crunched any numbers to see what that tax revenue would be if they were condos or single apartment dwelling?
No, not at this point, but we can look at that and email it out to the EDA
Guesstimate
board.
that to be- Because I know there's been one city councilor that's been pushing, not me, but one city councilor's been pushing the sale of that building for a long time to allow us as an EDA to take on some new projects. And back in the 90s, when this group decided to build that, that was a big risk, and they did it, and it turned out to be very successful. Is there, another project similar to that, or something totally different that we as a group would want to do? So that should be in our thinking process as well as we look at options down the road.
Chris, is the appraisal just on the 2 existing apartment buildings, or does it include the land in front?
It was just the 2 existing apartment buildings.
Okay.
I'll offer a motion to receive and order filed the Garden Terrace appraisal report.
Second.
First and second. Would this be the time then to authorize staff to take it to the next step and just consider what selling the property, what would be our next steps? Because I agree, and I've heard that along with Les, why does the EDA own such a big multifamily? I mean, I've heard that the whole time I've been on the EDA, and maybe the timing is right. I think if we're starting to talk about our resources getting to be scarce in these projects, I mean, and I know there are a number of them. I think that looking forward, that redevelopment of downtown, the mall, a bunch of other potential projects, to have the cash resources to be very responsive to some of those needs the timing might be right. So would that be,
Yeah, we can.
can I authorize that with this? I know we're just receiving it, but just some feedback as to what would be our next steps. I like Les's thing, what would the tax ramifications be to getting it on the private rolls? I think that's a really good question. And then what would we have to do in terms of investment risk in order to look at it from a cash flow standpoint in meeting an investment return similar to what we're seeing right now? So what would that look like? Those would be the 2 things I'd be really interested in.
Yeah, we can bring it back at probably if you give us the September meeting.
Yeah,
we can
that's
put
fine.
the
Whatever
information
timing you
together.
think
I think
that
would
would
be-
need to do that. So
Be doable, yeah.
I'd appreciate that. And I hope the other commissioners can understand that this is just the first step. And it provides one piece of information, but I think there's some additional pieces of information that we would all want to try to review and look at.
Yep.
So, thank you. So, any other discussion? If not, then I'll entertain the roll call vote.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Becker,
Yes.
Commissioner Yanni,
Yes.
Commissioner Schultz,
Yes,
President Brum.
Yes. Item 8.1, Economic Development Activity Report.
I'll just go over this real quickly with you. The New Ulm Partnership is moving forward with developing an economic development website. And like Chris mentioned, he'll bring a quote to you at the next meeting to move forward on that. We are working together to find ways to promote New Ulm employment opportunities, to try and recruit employees to New Ulm. We also met yesterday to explore recommendations from the Strong Towns mini retreat for potential action. And we're also exploring ways to connect with immigrant and refugee populations to potentially relocate here again to potentially fill some of those job openings. On the childcare front, the childcare team held a community town hall, and the Community Solution Action Plan and SMART goals were shared with the public at that time. The team will continue to meet and work on their goals now that they have been established. And then under other, you can just see the other activity that happened during the month of June. And I'll just note that Wendy Anderson attached her first quarter report for her consulting work that she does on behalf of the EDA.
And one other thing that I would just like to add, been in contact with Region 9 to look at potentially doing some type of visa program through the city or another entity to help get employees or help employers potentially getting people through the visa process, work visas and stuff like that, and then looking at MSU students who are there on student visas, transitioning them into jobs here in the state. So I should have a little bit more information by our next meeting, kind of where that is.
I'll make a motion to accept the Economic Development Activity Report for June 2022.
You have a first and second. Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the roll call vote.
Commissioner Berg?
Yes.
Commissioner Becker?
Yes.
Commissioner Yanni?
Yes.
Commissioner Schultz?
Yes.
President Brum?
Yes, it's carried. Item number 9 is New Ulm Business Resource and Innovation Center Report, also known as NewBrick. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning. Do you wish me to go up to the microphone?
I
Yes, please.
probably, for the public at large to,
The public at large? Each of you should have a report just to highlight. June was a busy month. We kind of had our coming out party, which was our new brick mixer. We had about 80 people there. And it was a way of kind of dovetailing into the next item, which was our Project Lead the Way conference. People might ask, what does economic development and K through 12 curriculum have to do with one another? As we look at our workforce shortages and our second largest employment sector being manufacturing, we're facing a critical time, and I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. At this conference, 3M told us that they will have over 200 job openings next year. Now, while we can't do things in the short term, and I'll get into another project that I am moving forward on called the Spark Bus, but we have to now equip our kids with skill sets that these manufacturers will now implement into their factories. Because when you're faced with worker shortages from a corporate level, they have two choices: either consolidate or automate. No one's talking about the big plant in eastern Tennessee where 3M plans to employ over 3,000 people. These things are real in every one of the towns where 3M is at. We need to be aware of this, and we need to be different. So one way of showing 3M and our other manufacturing partners is that we're trying to equip our kids with the skill sets that heavily automation manufacturing factories require. And it was enthusiastically embraced. We had all the plant leaders there from Spexis, 3M, AMPI, Kraft. We had the two men from Indianapolis at Project Lead the Way. Tom, thank you for attending, by the way. Thank you for your patience. That was a long day. But we had 28 teachers from the whole area, Springfield, GFW. All the New Ulm schools were represented, including St. Paul's, Minnesota Valley Lutheran High School, and Cathedral. And it may take a while for us to integrate this curriculum, but Cathedral is already moving ahead in embracing Project Lead the Way for their computer science class in high school. And so out of that meeting, we formed a task force that includes a teacher representative from each of the New Ulm schools and from Springfield and from GFW to begin looking at how we select curriculum, how we train teachers, and how we fund the PLTW curriculum. And it's our intent, as New Brick moves forward, that we become the funding mechanism to help our schools implement this technology and this curriculum, because it's not just the curriculum, but it's equipment, robotics, all that stuff. 3M has also indicated that they're very interested in donating robots. Ted Marty from Shells is already setting aside some working conveyor systems so that we can begin building an automation scenario for our kids to learn on. So that was a success. Project Spark, which is our incubator, this then dovetails into New Brick's goal of becoming more self-sustaining. We are filing for a 501c3 status, which requires a 1023 form, not the easy form that most of the nonprofits around here are, because that limits you to $50,000 in annual receipts. So we have to go through a full-fledged 501c3 application. That will probably take until October, and then from there it'll probably take a year until we get approval from the federal government. Spark Bus. I've said this before, but on a daily basis, there's over 350 people that leave New Ulm to go to Mankato, and 338 people that leave Mankato to work in New Ulm. We must start thinking differently about how we help fill these worker deficits, realizing that we have to address things like immigration and like recruitment and visas and all that, but all that takes a great deal of time. My concern is that when we have our workforce housing done, that's not going to be done till 1023, the fall of 1023. What's going to happen to 3M if they're 200 workers short from this time to 2023? How do we help them? We need to be asking ourselves these questions. And it's not just 3M. It's Kraft. It's AMPI. It's Firmenich. All of these people need some type of help. And remember, too, that all the cities our size are suffering with this same dilemma. And so one of the reasons going back to Project Lead the Way is that we give corporate plants like 3M some ammunition to go back to the corporate offices and say, this is what New Ulm is doing to help with this worker shortage. It's not enough, but it's a start. So with the Spark Bus, I'll be working with EDA Region 9 and Smith and the Department of Transportation to write a grant to see if we can get a pilot project funded, hopefully by the time the interstate and freeway open up between Mankato and New Ulm, to begin a trial of a Spark commuter bus that can bring workers to and from New Ulm and Mankato. And I think we also need to look at all of the western area towns as well, because according to EDA, all of them are economically distressed. And because of that, there should be additional federal dollars available through grant funding through EDA and USDA and some of those. Lastly, one thing to remember, and because I served under Governor Dayton in long-term care as a technology consultant for the long-term care industry, a trend is occurring in our long-term care industry is that consolidation continues to occur because of the low reimbursement rates for Medicaid dollars. I am working with Oak Hills to try and facilitate some partnerships with some larger long-term care facilities, knowing that this is going to impact Oak Hills sooner rather than later. So we'll be meeting at the end of the month with Western Homes out of Iowa. They're very, very well known. They have chains all across Iowa. I know their CEO and their chief legal staff, and they've agreed to come up and talk with Oak Hills about discussing some types of potential partnerships. But this is going to be a problem in these rural areas. St. John's and Sleepy are in Springfield. the VOA and Sleepy Eye. Single entity long-term care facilities will not be able to stand on their own. The numbers just don't work. And couple that with worker care shortages as well. So I wish the news was a lot better, but it's reality, and we have to deal with reality. That is my report. Thank you.
Any questions for Paul?
The operating of your Spark bus would be 10/23 of next year?
That would be the plan, yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 10, other business, 10.1, joint powers agreement between Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension and the EDA.
This is nothing new. We renew this agreement every 5 years, and it is due for renewal again. We are required for our rental assistance programs to do a criminal background check on any adult applicants for our program, and so we have an agreement in place. We use the New Ulm Police Department. They do our background checks for free, but we do need this joint powers agreement in place in order for them to be able to access the system to give us the information we need.
This seems like a routine thing, so I'll offer the resolution and waive the reading approving a joint powers agreement between the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension and the New Ulm Economic Development Authority and designating the executive director to sign the contract on behalf of the EDA.
Second.
First and second, is there any additional discussion on this matter? Hearing none, we will call for the roll call vote.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Bedker,
Yes.
Commissioner Yanni,
Yes.
Commissioner Schultz,
Yes.
President Brom.
Yes, that motion is carried. Item 10.2, address future request for EDA funds.
All right, this was on the agenda last month, and due to technical difficulties, the city attorney was unable to join the Zoom. That was actually my fault, but he's on today, so we'll have the discussion today. So I will turn it over to you, Robert.
Thank you, board members. This was, I think, prompted by advice we had given in connection with the recent decision the EDA made to fund the Oak Hills project. So I had suggested at that point to staff that on requests for funding that the EDA receives, and I understand you probably receive these fairly routinely, that fall outside an established program. So for example, not something you've already established an application process for and allocated funding for, but a kind of a one-off request for a specific project, that there be a process in place where the request is referred to our office just to confirm some basics about the EDA's legal authority, making sure that we can identify actual authority for the EDA to provide the funding, to kind of vet and evaluate and confirm that the EDA is the right entity within the city structure to be providing the funding, and to identify the best mechanism to provide the funding, assuming it is authorized. Many times, for example, rather than issuing a grant to support a project, we would recommend, and I think statute would actually require, that the assistance be provided in the form of a forgivable loan. So again, we're talking about just a process and understanding that we'd recommended be in place before final approval is given for the EDA to provide assistance to kind of specific projects outside of any established programs that the EDA has in place. And just as an example, I think of what this would look like in practice, I think the EDA's consideration today of the J.R. Schugel request, and then referring back to staff in our office to prepare the actual documents for final approval, it would look a lot like that I thought was handled well, and it made sense, and that's really about what we're recommending. So that's just, I think, an update. Again, I think it was prompted by the consideration the EDA gave to the Oak Hills project. I'm sure it will recur in other situations as well. But I'd be happy to answer any questions if the board has any. Otherwise, I think that brings everyone up to date.
Good morning, Robert. I just wanted a clarification then. You kind of referenced the J.R. Schugel request. Would this be then a two-step process where we would have it brought before us at one monthly meeting for consideration, and then it gets referred back to staff for the forgivable loan? Or is that something that we could facilitate in a single meeting where we consider it, and then we could move forward with the actual forgivable loan during the same meeting process? Or do you recommend that it stay as a two-step process over two meetings? My only concern would be one of timing in some instances where it drags out an extra month. And I don't know if there's any way we can facilitate that to occur maybe perhaps in a single month at a single meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think ultimately it's something for staff to work with our office on. If there's a time-sensitive project and there's a good staff is supportive of the request and wants to bring it to the EDA board in a form where it can be approved, then I think it would be appropriate for staff to work with our office on the front end. If time isn't as essential on a given request, the two-step process might be more appropriate. So I guess I would say it would be case by case. And if there's really an urgency, then we would just need to be involved to get the documents ready, so the EDA could act on them at the same meeting.
Okay, thank you. And it sounds like then the two-step process would be probably the standard, with a single request being the exception and under certain circumstances where the timing is more critical.
Yeah, I think that makes sense
Okay.
because my assessment would be staff would likely want to gauge the EDA's appetite to even proceed with it before, investing a lot of time and energy and resources to prepare documents that might not be approved. So
Yeah.
I think that would be probably the more usual way this would proceed. But again, in a specific case, we could always adjust.
That makes sense to me, I guess. I don't know if anyone else has questions. I guess we don't, so. Thank you for your time this morning, Robert.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 10.3 then, Community Child Care Center. Consideration for acquiring a building to provide space for a community child care center.
All right, Commissioners and President Brahm, as you know, we applied for a grant through First Children's Finance to go through the Rural Child Care Innovation Program. And we've been working through that process for about the last 8 months or so. One of the takeaways we learned through that process is that there's a new licensing model called the POD model for family licensed child care providers to share space, and up to 4 providers can share a space. Another takeaway is that adding family licensed providers is the quickest and easiest way to add child care spots to the community, because a child care center licensing process is much longer as it goes through the state, where a family licensed provider goes through the county here locally. So with that information, we took a look at available properties in our community to see if we could identify a property that would potentially work for a POD model child care center, and ideally one that could accommodate 4 providers so we could maximize the POD model. Staff did identify a property. We toured the property, and we've reported on this before. We toured the property with Brown County licensing staff, fire chief, building official, other city staff, and we all agreed that the building we looked at would work well for a POD model and could accommodate 4 licensed providers. It had outdoor space, it had the required indoor square footage that would be required to care for that number of children. So behind the scenes, we worked on meeting with the building owner to talk about potential purchase price. We also reached out to our provider community, and we have identified 2 providers that would be interested in renting space. So We feel like we had enough information in place to bring it to the EDA for formal consideration at this time. If the project moved forward, we would advertise the opportunity for the other 2 spaces and try to have all 4 providers in place by the time the facility opened. But we felt that having 2 of the 4 potentially filled gave us a good starting point. We've also been exploring funding options to help with the cost if this moves forward, such as grant opportunities and also partnering with a local 501c3 organization to manage a capital campaign to accept donations. I did some outreach to some of our larger employers, and they are willing to donate toward a community child care center, but it would need to go through a 501c3 so that they can get the tax benefits. So that outreach has already been started. We have already secured a $30,000 grant to help with the rehab costs if this moves forward. If we don't move forward, we would need to return that money. I actually have the check. I just haven't done anything with it yet until this discussion has taken place. I have another grant application pending that I'm waiting to hear back on. As far as a timeline, should the project move forward, we would hope to acquire the building this fall, work on the necessary rehab over the winter months, and have the facility ready to open in early to mid 2023, if all goes well. We also would need to implement an application process for providers who wish to rent space in the building. Part of that application would require that providers take infants, because we've heard feedback from some in-home providers that they choose not to take infants. They only take toddlers and preschoolers and school-age children. But we want to add infant spots, so we would require that. And we would also require that the providers accept families that utilize the Child Care Assistance Program, so that low-income families would be able to access these spots. The total estimated cost to acquire the property and do the necessary rehab to meet the license requirements is approximately $500,000. I am not proposing that the EDA be on the hook for that entire dollar amount. We may need to put that up front to get the project started, but then we would apply for grants and, like I say, ask businesses to contribute to the cost as, you know, a community child care center. So I don't know how much of that we would be able to get back, but we're hoping, you know, at least half. And I don't know, Chris, if I'm missing anything, if you want to weigh in on this.
No, I think you've pretty much hit everything, that needs to be said, and it's looking at, we have the potential to address some of the need here. Again, the building is available. Like Heather said, we had gone through building official, Brown County licensing, and said it's a pretty good spot. Not a lot of work is needed to go through there. Sprinklering would kind of be the one major thing we'd have to do to get the building up to compliance. Other than that, it's moving some walls and things like that, but nothing major. And I think a lot, daycare is an issue. You talk to anyone who has an infant, anyone thinking about having an infant, and daycare is the number one issue. So this is our opportunity to at least, I would say, start changing that. If no one else is willing to step up and do something, this hopefully is the catalyst that starts other people doing things, because it's not going to solve itself.
Do we think that the 4 pods would be just a single provider? Would that person be able to employ people as well, or
It would be 4 separate.
It would have to be-
single person operator?
No, it'd have to be 4 licenses, 4 different people.
Right,
Yeah.
but they're not going to be hiring 2 additional people to help them run the pod.
No.
And then does it cannibalize, so to speak, existing daycare providers?
It
I-
could.
No, there's so many spots
There's so much
available.
need,
Yeah.
there's room
Demand
for,
is,
But are we taking somebody who's doing it out of their house already and moving them to a different location?
Well, that was my-
potentially.
Yeah, my question
Potentially.
too is, I mean, with this 4 pods, I mean, and it's a single-family license, so in essence, there are 2 infant spots per license, correct? So we would expand infant spots in the community by 8. And I think the need is much greater. So this is not really going to directly address the greatest need, which is infant openings. And I think that if you look at the structure of the licensing, that really becomes more feasible through a center license. They're able to take more infant spots because they have the capability of hiring additional staff and keeping the ratios that would then provide them. But the trade-off you make, like Heather alluded to, is the state licensing process is much, it's a different ballgame altogether, and it takes a lot longer. And so I think, having sat in with this group, the approach we're taking is multifaceted. You know, this is one of a number of potential solutions that we are seeking. My only concern on it, and is that bottom line with the $500,000 and the fact that we have a set dollar amount, I feel, that we can realistically look at allocating to the childcare needs as our EDA commission sits today. So I almost get the feeling we're putting a lot of eggs in one basket here. And not to say that this is not a good project to be involved with, but I'm really encouraged by the fact that you've already spoken to employers, and it sounds like they're willing to put forth financial commitments to help facilitate this too. I would like to see our emphasis go in that end so that we kind of know going in what our financial commitment, this is kind of open-ended
yeah,
right now
it's
as it sits
difficult to
today.
raise money for a project that's a potential. I
Yeah.
mean, we really need to say, we're moving forward on this and we need to raise money.
My only question, and I know we haven't had, and I don't know what level of discussions you had with the building owner and the seller and all that, would the potential be there for us to pursue an option to purchase? And that we would make a smaller financial commitment on an option to buy it, but then try to get our money lined up. And if we get the money lined up the way we'd like to, then we could go forward with the purchase and move ahead. And that could really facilitate our capital campaign right from, this point forward to say, okay, this is what we need to raise to make this happen. And where's our level of commitment in the community to kind of see this thing come to fruition.
Did you mention that there's already businesses that are willing to support this?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, this was the entire purpose of that community childcare grant that we got through First Children's Finance, was to come and to identify what the opportunities are and how to best address the childcare shortage that we have. We've explored some other options. The mayor had some great ideas with having maybe some retired folks, take some classes, and out of that, we did get somebody that is kind of a fill-in, I believe. But the need is now. We have the commitments from the businesses. We have a grant here. They've sourced a property. I mean, this is. I think the sooner that we can move forward with something like this, I mean, I think Heather and the staff at First Children's Finance have been doing a great job of guiding us, and I don't think that they're going to drop the ball on us at this point.
Chairman Brown,
Yes, sir.
couple of comments on my end. I have a little concern that if we have current daycare who just simply choose to move into this building, we haven't gained a lot other than what I'm hearing is maybe some newborn slots. And $500,000 for some baby slots is a lot of money. And I understand the pod concept, but wouldn't we be better off if we, as an EDA, provided a building, provided financial support to get it up and running, and hire a director to run a large facility? We would gain so many more beds. And whether this building qualifies for that, I don't know. It might be too big, but I'm just thinking that dollar amount is awful high. And if it's current people just moving in, we haven't gained anything or not much.
Well,
Would we be better off the other way, Heather? What do you
one
thoughts
one
on?
response I have to that, Commissioner Schultz, is that we've already lost an in-home provider because she wanted to find space outside of her home and she was unable to do so, and she is now out of the child care business. One of the providers that I have interested in this space has said she will close her business if she cannot find space outside of her house. It's very hard on your home to run a childcare. It's very invasive to your family to run a childcare business out of your home. So part of it is retaining providers and not losing them
Good point.
and having them go take a job doing something else because they can't stand running it out of their home any longer. So we may be retaining providers by offering this space. And the other provider I have interested is newly licensed but does not wish to operate out of her home. And some people don't have a home that can be licensed. They don't have the square footage or the space required. So we might be able to recruit new providers that would like to go into this but don't, maybe they're renting and the landlord won't allow it, or they don't have the space but they'd like to run a business. So it's opening an opportunity potentially for new people. And at the town hall, there was a lot of discussion about this, and the providers that were in attendance felt like this was a really great option for people to run a childcare business where they didn't want to run it out of their home. So they were very excited about this idea.
Great. Thank you for the feedback. I appreciate it.
Les,
Another
that's a good,
comment-
go ahead. Go ahead.
Just the other comment that people had were, what other buildings did the EDA take a look at that are empty in our community? And can you run through those quick, Heather?
Yeah, and when I started looking at properties that might work, I did look at, I know one of the ones that was brought up was the Wells Fargo property. That property is for sale. It is, they're asking $470,000, which is more than the property that I'm looking at. Also, in talking with the building official, that building is so chopped up. I think it would take more rehab than the building that we've identified. So that's one of the reasons that was ruled out. I know someone brought up the Alliance Bank building, the old bank. I don't know what the bank's plans are for that building. They don't currently have it listed for sale or lease, so I never explored that building because I don't even know if it's available. And then some of the other questions were, have we looked at renting space in our event centers, the one downtown and the one on 20th North? I really don't know how that would work. Both of those event centers, I would imagine, at times have events during the week where they would make more revenue than they would, I'm assuming, renting it to us to have a childcare provider in there. And what would the provider do with all of their equipment and supplies on the weekends when there is a wedding in that space? They have to pack it all up and put it in storage and then take it back all out, Monday morning before the kids arrive. I just don't see that being feasible. And the other point I'll make is, if we move forward with this, we will own a building. We will have an asset. So it's not money that's being thrown away to rent or being given as a grant. It's money that down the road, if this is no longer being run as a childcare facility, could be used for another use or could be sold. And we would, we have an asset. So I like the idea of purchasing rather than renting space because we're not just, in a sense, throwing money out the window.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Heather, do you know what the taxes are in that particular building?
I do. I also printed that off because that was asked, and I have it here somewhere. Here it is. So for 2022, the annual property taxes on the building we are looking at is $22,612. Of that, the city's portion is $9,668.
Thank you. And just my last comment is, a year and a half ago, we as an EDA decided that daycare was going to be one of our top priorities. And I appreciate staff taking the time to try and find some solutions. And I know it's taken time and a lot of research. So I appreciate that, Heather, and your staff that have worked on this project. And I think we need to start looking at moving forward on this and supporting this concept, and let's get some help in our community.
So if this is something the EDA wants to move forward on, we would go into closed session to talk about negotiations for purchase of the building. And then I also have the accepting of the grant on the agenda. So I don't think there's any formal vote on this item. This was just for discussion to determine if the consensus was whether or not to move forward.
Have we done any research or crunched any numbers, I guess, for lack of a better word, on operational costs? And I'm assuming we would lease to the 4 providers?
We would.
Any preliminary numbers on those yet?
We did. We had First Children's Finance attend our meeting, I think 2 months ago, and they gave us that feasibility analysis
Yep.
with different scenarios. And I think we were proposing a rent of $200 a month. Basically, we just need enough money to cover our utilities and, minimal costs like snow removal
Well, that
and
was my
lawn
next
mowing.
question. So the providers would not be responsible for any utility costs. That would come from us as the building owner. So we would have ongoing operational costs with
Correct,
with
and
that.
that's what the rent would cover.
And then the maintenance and upkeep would be our responsibility as well.
Right.
And so we'd get $800 a month to offset some of those costs. So it would represent a long-term cost to the EDA.
Right.
I would think. We would, with $800 lease payments received every month, we would be running at a deficit going forward long-term. I would think that would probably.
Do you think, Nicole?
Probably. On utilities alone, yeah.
Okay, and those numbers aren't set in stone. That
Right.
was just
Right, and I
rough
sat in
proposal.
on that feasibility, and I know the one question I asked, and this is economically, it's more financially prudent for an in-home provider to operate out of their home. They can see a greater return or profit by doing so. I understand exactly the notion that it's an interruption and an inconvenience to have it in your home, but from an economic standpoint, I think it's more feasible for an in-home provider to stay in their home. They get more tax breaks, and so that was one of the questions I had, and I didn't know if there's a legal way we could create, say, even a cooperative basis where they could see some of the tax benefits, for instance, of depreciating if they had or acquired some ownership interest as a provider in this building, and we shared some of those things so that they would see some tax benefits and making it more economically feasible, more similar to what they would get if they were running it out of their home, but yet they're not in their home. So I don't know, and I don't recall that we did anything during the feasibility study that approached that. So those are just some thoughts I had. I absolutely understand what the need is, and I like the approach that we're taking. This is one of several different things we're considering in terms of meeting the needs for our current daycare shortage. And I just hope that, my only fear is if we go ahead and write the check now to buy the building, interest in it, they're going to say, well, the city's already bought it, the EDA's already bought it, so we don't really need to put up as much money as we would have otherwise. That's my concern with this, is that once we write the check, the interest in it may wane a little bit from other sources, that if we had it as something up front that this is what we need to acquire it, then the hope would be that more people would come up and participate in funding it up front. So, but that's all I
You know, a
my
lot of
thoughts on
our
it.
major employers have been talking about the need for childcare. They need to recruit employees. Their employees need childcare. It reduces absenteeism, all sorts of issues. So I would be hard pressed to think that they would pull out now and not want to be a part of this and not want to show the community that they're trying to do something on the childcare front.
Well, and I know other, like the school district is considering their options. We've had discussions with the expansion of current centers in town and what the EDA might do to facilitate some expansion. And that goes back to how much money is the EDA willing to put out in total to meet the needs of our daycare shortage? And what my thought is how do we get the most bang for our buck? I mean, if we look at this, and this makes the worst case assumption, is that we have to fund the full thing, the $500,000. I mean, that's over $10,000 per added daycare spot within the community. Could we do better than that? Could we better leverage money to get more spots, daycare spots available within the community for less dollars per spot? That's the way I approach this, and that's where I'm interested in looking at this alongside other options to say, how do we best facilitate getting the most daycare spots available for the money, the limited resources that we really have?
I believe that was the purpose of the grant with Children's Finance, with First Children's Finance, was to identify through town halls, through collection of data, through surveys with families, through surveys with providers, to determine what the best and most economically feasible route is. And this is what they've presented. And this is what
our
we've been working.
presentation, though. This isn't theirs. I mean,
No, but they've identified the pod model and presented the information.
as an option. I mean, and we
Right.
have other options, and that's where
Yes,
I.
and there always will be other options, but we've been working on this for a year and a half, and there are no other options at the table at this point. To start from scratch, how is that going to impact the needs that our employers have right now? They're already on board, you said, with supporting, and their need will not change whether the building is purchased or not purchased.
I understand your concern with the price tag. It is a lot of money. If you look at the CTE Center, what the school did, they put up the money to get that center up and running, and they're doing a capital campaign to, in a sense, pay themselves back. And this would be a similar model. The employers came to the table and contributed to the CTE Center, even though it was already in the works and the school had already put up the money. I think we will have the same support from our employers. They know childcare is an issue for their employees, and they have jobs to fill. I can't promise that, but I have faith, I have optimism in our community that they will step up to the plate. New Ulm has been very good about coming together to meet all kinds of needs in our community. The Oak Hills campaign is another example of that, where the community's coming together to donate toward their expansion. I just have a lot of faith in our community that we can make this happen.
Heather, I agree with you. I mean, this thing has been going round and round now for, I guess, a year and a half, and I'm relatively new to this group, but, there's risk in everything we do. But this seems to me like it's not that big a risk, and it's certainly worth taking. And, I mean, I employ a lot of young mothers. And I know about their struggles, and I know about young women that work for us and can't anymore because of the daycare issue, and it's a major problem in our community, and somebody's got to provide some ideas and some leadership here, and unless we can somebody else can come up with something really good, really fast. I think this is the way to go. Now, I do have one question, being that I'm new to this, how does the EDA, if we purchase it, how do we finance that? To pay, how do we pay the present owner? Where do we get the money? Is it a bank
We have,
financing or
we
what?
have reserves, we have
Oh, we do have
money
adequate reserves?
that we could
Oh,
pay for the building. And then, like I
Okay.
say, we would do a capital
Okay.
campaign to ask for donations.
so really, we're not even talking about any risk here on financing.
No, there would be
In
no
other words-
loan
In
or,
other words, whether we got cash or we got a building, we still we got value.
Right.
And so
My concern
that's
is
easy.
only one of opportunity costs. And I just want to be clear that, because I'm a part of this group, there are other options being considered right now. They just don't happen to be in front of the EDA today. They're at various stages of their development, and they involve, the school district. They involve current daycare centers. So there's, like I said earlier, there's multifaceted approaches going on. My only concern would be, okay, say we agree to fund this $500,000 to purchase a building, and a month or two down the road, say an existing center comes forward and says, okay, we have expansion plans, this is what we can do, this is what we want to do, and our cost is going to be $500,000. Are we going to be ready to fund a second $500,000 request if we've already committed to doing this? And what if that second request on a per-child basis is more cost-effective than this? That's my only reason for concern today. I'm not against this at all. I just want us to be considerate of all the options that are currently under consideration in work. This one just is kind of come to the forefront first. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the best option. It's just the first option that's being presented to us right now. And that's my only reason for concern at this point.
Counselor Schultz, or Commissioner Schultz, was it you or Mayor Sweeney in charge of contacting some of the other providers, some of the other centers to see if there was an interest in expansion? I believe that was
Yes.
part of the research. Schultz?
Yes, that was my responsibility, and of the 7, I believe 6 responded, and of the 6, 5 had an interest in potential expansion if funding was available to them. So it was just a preliminary ask. Would you be willing?
And do you know if they're currently exploring any kind of grant or funding options to help support expansion?
To my knowledge, none have went that route. I think they're waiting to see if we were going to take the next step in saying, send us your preliminary ideas or concepts by X day, and we'll start discussion.
Sure.
But we haven't done any of that yet. So I was just an initial request a couple months ago.
And then just generally speaking, opinions on new construction versus an existing structure, what the cost benefits would be of that?
There was a couple facilities that are landlocked, that don't have the capability of expanding. But they still had an interest in maybe facility 2. Certainly more cost effective would be an expansion versus a whole separate building and separate staff. But that would probably come out in the proposals.
I just want to be clear because it's, the discussion here is making it sound like there's only room for one. And the need that we have, even just looking at the Newbrick report that was presented by Mr. Wessel, that, by 2023, 3M is projected to have over 200 job openings in New Ulm. AMPI, Windings, Crafts, Spexis, another 25 to 50 new employees during this same time. All of this is correlating with the expansion and the opening of Highway 14 in October of 2023, fingers crossed. So, what I'm saying is that this need is not going to go away and that this one pod model isn't going to solve the problem, but it is a start, and it is a commitment to the community of of the direction that we're going and where we need to be. I don't think anyone at this table can say that there's not an intense need. And I would, I will just state that I feel very good about this project and very confident that not only, would we find the providers, but as Heather had stated, through all the research that she's prepared, that there are businesses that are on board with supporting this project as well. We're not going to be left in the lurch with this.
Yeah, I understand the concern about the price tag, but again, I just want to reiterate that that probably will not be our final cost. So if we get additional grants, if we get the donations from the community, that will then, that money that we get back could be used to help fund an expansion if a center came forward, if that makes sense.
You know, or you can look at it as maybe this is it. We use $500,000. We don't ask for donations, but when an expansion comes up, we look at a much smaller amount of 100,000 to show that we back an expansion for something, and that's when we go after, you know, the companies and stuff to help with those type of centers. So again, there's different options so you don't cannibalize, and there's other things we can do. We don't have to fund a second project at $500,000.
Yeah, and of the 4 childcare centers we currently have, I don't recall them coming to the EDA for money to get up and running what they have now. I mean, if they felt it could cash flow and it was worth the investment, you know, they move forward. I don't know why they would need funding.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I'll pick on Kids Excel. They have land to expand. They know there's an issue and they haven't expanded. So is there an issue
And
that
they are
they're
a
done?
nonprofit that
Yeah.
would be, you know, have a lot of grant opportunities available.
Yeah.
It's a huge undertaking for an organization and
I think
undergoing expansion.
a lot of the discussion considering an expansion has more to do with considerations with workforce, which is a whole nother issue unto itself.
It's a
And
risk.
that, you know, the discussions I've had, it really centers on that. You can build a new wing or put an addition on, but if you don't have staff to go in, your expansion's you're gonna have a lot of overhead costs. You're not gonna have the children to come in there to offset that. So I think that being a consideration would be one of the reasons that they would consider looking for local help where they may not have had to do that in the past. The conditions in the economy have changed dramatically.
I know the school, you mentioned that they're looking at adding some childcare, but their concern is, are they going to be able to staff it?
Exactly.
And if
That-
they feel like they can't staff it, that might keep them from moving forward. And so then we're just kicking the can down the road again, you know,
Right. Well,
and
and
delaying,
I
and our
know
families need help now.
Some of our discussions too is that they put actually pod models within schools too. That's been one of the models that's been successful in another community. And so I think that all options should be on the table. Heather, you mentioned earlier too, you have a second grant that you've applied for. How much was that for?
You know, I don't know because we had to submit a letter of interest that we were interested in applying for the grant. I think it was with the Blandon Foundation and what we would use the money for. And so I submitted that, you know, we're looking at doing a child care facility and that's what the money would be used for. And I have not heard back. So we haven't actually applied for the grant. We've just submitted a letter of interest. But I have a whole list of organizations that we could apply for grants with, some right here locally, United Way, New Ulm Area Foundation, Brown County EDA has money for childcare. And then in addition to, you know, the wider statewide and SMIF and Region 9 and all those organizations. Everyone knows childcare is a need, and it's nationwide. It's not just here. Everyone knows there's a need. So the money is out there to fund childcare projects. You just have to have a project that you're moving forward on to apply for grants. So it's kind of a cart
I
before the
understand.
horse scenario.
You
Yeah.
put it very well earlier when it says we have to take a leap of faith or a step in faith, and I understand that, and I think that's what we
Yeah,
need to do.
it's very difficult to ask for money for a potential
Yeah.
idea of
No,
a
I
project.
completely understand that.
I guess I'd like to say I'm optimistic about this project. I have 2 kids of my own and have been down that road with childcare challenges myself. We are lucky in New Ulm to have some fantastic people that are providers that do that in their home or in centers. And I know there's challenges of having it in your home. Who knows? Maybe this will take off, and some of those businesses that are interested in supporting this will see value in it, and maybe we'll see more of these show up in New Ulm too. Who knows? So
Yeah.
It could, this
We
could
could
be
be
a
the model.
proving model, yeah.
Well, I know there was a church too that was expressed interest in a pod. I don't know where they're at. We've not heard, at least I've not heard any additional information.
Which church, is that the one that lost the?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I have not heard either where they're at with that. I know they've been working with First Children's Finance as well on that.
So, I mean, I think there, I have to commend the mayor for bringing this to the forefront. And I think this has spurred a lot of action, which I'm really optimistic on. And I think we're going to find solutions out there, and some of them are already in the works. So I think, what did this all start with? Grandpa having to take care of some kids and saying, hey, you know. To a degree.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I hear you, because I've been in that.
Unbendable grandpa.
Well, I get the call, that was just last month. Hey, can you come watch the kids for a little bit, you know?
And Grandpa's not running for reelection because Grandpa's
I can't bend
expecting
over
another
anymore.
grandchild.
So, no, I think this has facilitated a lot of good discussion, and I think we're moving in the right direction. That's, maybe it's the pragmatic, being counter number cruncher guy that I am, that's where my reservations are. Can we better spend money somewhere else? But maybe we can't. I don't know. I've heard from enough corporate people too that there is interest there. I just hope that when the time comes to get the checkbooks out,
Yeah.
that they're there. That's my only
Yeah,
reservation.
what they're expressing is they want childcare expanded, but they don't want to run a childcare.
No, and I understand that
So they're
completely.
willing to contribute toward someone else running.
That's an
you know.
easier solution for them, which I
Right,
completely
right,
understand.
the liability
And
and
this
all
is
of
a
that,
perfect
yeah.
opportunity for us to step forward as a group and say, okay, we'll bridge that gap, and we'll be a participant and do this. But, and no, I think, let's give it a go, huh?
So what are you asking for Heather now today?
Well, there's no action on that item. That was just discussion. And then we're going to move on to the next two items, and we'll get into
Adjournment eventually.
The devil's
yeah.
in the details, you know. So.
All right. Well, I think, anyone else want to say anything on this discussion? Are we?
Yeah, is the consensus that we do want to move forward? Is anyone against moving forward?
No,
I'm in favor of moving forward.
I say we move forward.
Moving forward.
I'm a yes.
well, there you have it.
10.4.
Let's move forward.
All right. Next item.
And that's to accept the grant.
Yeah, so this is,
$30,000.
we're already
Imagine
on our
that.
way.
Yeah.
So I sort of did put the cart before the horse, and a grant opportunity came to my attention, and the application deadline was May 27th. So even though I didn't know if we were moving forward, I didn't want to miss the opportunity. I went ahead and applied, and we did receive a $30,000 grant from First Children's Finance. So we need to formally approve that grant. We received $27,000 now, and we'll receive, which is 90%, and we'll receive the additional 10% after the project's been completed.
And this would be for the improvements, not the acquisition.
This is for the rehab. It could not be used for acquisition.
I'll offer a motion to accept First Children's Finance Rural Community Child Care Grant in the amount of $30,000.
First and second, is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, then we'll call for the roll call vote.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Betker,
Yes.
Commissioner Yanni,
Yes.
Commissioner Schultz,
Yes.
President Brum.
Yes. Gives us to item 10.5. So at this time, do we have to offer a motion and have an approval for the closed session?
Going to close,
Is that
yeah.
correct? So at this time, I would offer or entertain a motion to close the meeting for further discussions regarding the acquisition.
I'll offer that motion.
I'll second.
We have a first and second. Any additional discussion on the matter? Hearing none, then we'll call for the roll call vote.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Becker,
Yes.
Commissioner Yanni,
Yes.
Commissioner Schultz,
Yes.
President Brum.
Yes, motion is carried.
You do need to read that statement, though.
Oh, I'll read the, means I have to go backwards here. The Economic Development Authority will go into closed session to develop or consider offers or counteroffers with the purchase or sale of real personal property located at 1314 West Ridge Road. This is an exception to the open meeting law pursuant to Minnesota statutes 13D.05 subdivision 3C3 and 3D01 subdivision 3 to discuss the potential purchase or sale of real estate property.